Welcome to the 2012 Prestonian Lecture, Scouting and Freemasonry, two parallel organisations. My name is Tony Harvey. As well as being a Freemason, I'm a volunteer with the Scouts and have been an active member of that organisation since the age of 8. In this Prestonian Lecture I shall look at the parallels between Scouting and Freemasonry, the relationship Scouting's founder, Robert Baden-Powell, had with Freemasonry, the relationship between the two organisations today, and the opportunities for a mutually beneficial relationship in the future. Before I start, I want to pay tribute to Brother William Preston, the foremost Masonic educator of his age, after whom the Prestonian Lectureship is named. The Prestonian Lectures are the only lectures held under the authority of the United Grand Lodge of England. Each year, a member is appointed to deliver a lecture on a Masonic topic of his own choosing, to educate and entertain a general lodge audience. It is customary for the Prestonian Lecture to be printed in booklet form for sale, the profits going to a charity or charities of the lecturer's choice. So, why did I choose the topic of Scouting and its relationship with Freemasonry? Having delivered this lecture in over 120 lodges, I have found that over 2/3 of Freemasons have, at some point in their lives, made the Scout promise. There has to be a reason for this. For me, it begs the question, if so many Freemasons were once Scouts, how many Scouts might one day wish to become Freemasons? For those of you who were not Scouts, I will briefly introduce the founder of Scouting, Robert Baden-Powell, often referred to as just BP. Baden-Powell rose to fame after his defence of the town of Mafeking during the Anglo-Boer War. He was a boy's own hero who had introduced innovative small group techniques into army training. Having been asked to adapt these to offer to young people, he ran an experimental camp on Brownsea Island before publishing the book Scouting for Boys in 1908. The book triggered the start of the world's largest youth organisation, which today numbers over 50 million members in 171 countries. So let's now look at the key parallels between Scouting and Freemasonry, and just 3 differences. Even more parallels are described in my book that accompanies this lecture. The most important parallel is that Scouting and Freemasonry, two values-based membership organisations, are built on the same moral principles. Expressed in both the Scout Promise and in Masonic ritual, although in different language, these come down to, first, our faith and beliefs. Secondly, care for and service to others. And thirdly, our approach to developing ourselves. Members of both organisations make a promise to join. Now that in itself is not unique. Many organisations ask us to make a written declaration. However, in both Scouting and Freemasonry, that promise is made in front of the members of the group we are joining, whether it be with our hand on the flag at a meeting of a Scout troop or with our hands on the volume of the Sacred Law at a meeting of a lodge. Both organisations can be said to be uniformed. So here on the left you'll see the current uniform of the Scout section for 11 to 14-year-olds, although some of the badges are now slightly different. And on the right you'll see the apron of a Master Mason. Uniform is a way of showing our allegiance to an organisation, that we're part of something bigger than us, as well as being a way of displaying our achievements. Incidentally, if you doubt whether Freemasonry is uniform, just ask members of the public who live near your Masonic hall how they recognise Freemasons arriving at their lodge. Both Scouting and Freemasonry are open to people of all faiths. Scouting has never been a Christian organisation, although Freemasonry originally was, but de-Christianised over the course of the 18th century. They are also open to people of all political views, although in neither organisation are members permitted to promote political views when acting as members. These are the current leaders of the two main political parties in the United Kingdom. Whatever our personal opinions, in both Scouting and Freemasonry, we silence all political arguments. Incidentally, I check the news every morning to see whether I have to change the photo in this slide. As a result of these last two parallels, both Scouting and Freemasonry quickly became the international forces for good, means to bring together people of all nations and of goodwill, despite their other differences. Both Scouting and Freemasonry offer their members a system of progression. In Scouting, this is through a carefully structured and balanced programme of activities, leading to various badges and awards. In Freemasonry, this is by progressing through the offices in the lodge and by learning more and more about Freemasonry's precepts. The effect in both cases is the same. Our members grow in competence and in confidence, becoming better people, better able to live meaningful lives and to make a contribution to the greater good. Another parallel is that both organisations share the same person as its titular head. Not only is His Royal Highness the Duke of Kent the Grand Master of the United Grand Lodge of England, but since 1975 he has been President of the Scout Association. However, he's not the first Royal Duke to hold both appointments at the same time. This is His Royal Highness the Duke of Connaught and Strathearn, who was Grand Master from 1901 until 1939. He was also, from 1913, the President of the Boy Scouts Association and, as we shall see, a very good friend of Robert Baden-Powell. My final parallel is a very personal one. I was born into Scouting. My parents were both active members, my father being a Rover Scout and my mother being a Lady Cubmaster. If her appointment puzzles you, please understand that wolf cubs were considered far too young to have mistresses. My parents first met each other at a Scout event. Love blossomed, and some years later I was born. And all I ever wanted to do was to be a Scout. I joined as soon as I could, in the week of my 8th birthday, and I've been an active member ever since. Scouting formed my values and provided me with the framework by which I live my life. At the age of 31, I became a Freemason. I was proposed by Scouting colleagues and initiated into a Scouting lodge. I wore Scout uniform for the ceremony, which was in Derbyshire's Scout Training Centre. I found in Freemasonry an organisation entirely compatible with Scouting, one which has helped me continue my development and clarify my purpose in life. Now let's turn to 3 key differences between Scouting and Freemasonry. My first is that Scouting exists primarily for the benefit of young people. We want to attract all young people and offer them skills for life. We accept all children, whatever their background or past behaviours. Freemasonry is fundamentally different. It is for mature adults who have already set their course in life. It offers no rehabilitation, but only seeks to make good men better. Then there are the girls. Robert Baden-Powell wrote a book called Scouting for Boys. Yet today, Scouting is a mixed organisation, offering the same opportunities to girls as well as boys. Here is my daughter Caroline, who also became a scout at the earliest age possible, in her case at 6 years of age. She's shown here with the Chief Scout Bear Grylls, first in 2011 and again here in 2019. But Caroline's generation is not the first to be girls in scouting. This is the Wolf Patrol at the first Scout rally at Crystal Palace in 1909. When he saw them, Baden-Powell said, "Who the devil are you?" "We're the Wolf Patrol," came the sassy reply. You see, no one had told them they could not join. Baden-Powell himself was quite comfortable with girls in the Scouts. Indeed, in his original handwritten notes for his scheme, he wrote, and I quote, "might also be extended to the training of girls." However, his advisors suggested girls be offered something different, so Baden-Powell founded the Girl Guides with the help of his sister. Today, Girl Guiding continues as a very successful, separate girl organisation. Incidentally, just to demonstrate the Wolf Patrol were not the only early Girl Scouts, here's the Red Rose Patrol from Poole in Dorset. My last difference is that between growth and decline. All membership organisations go through cycles with peaks and troughs in membership. Freemasonry has had a declining membership for almost 50 years. Scouting too has experienced the same. In the 1960s, Scouting made major changes to its organisation and programme just before I joined. As a result, at the age of 60, I am too young to have ever been a Boy Scout. The organisation I joined was just called Scouts. In the 1990s, Scouting was again in decline. Losing the equivalent of a county of 10,000 members each year, we knew we had to do something. We underwent a complete review of all aspects of Scouting. Thankfully, we retained the core of Scouting, our fundamental purpose and values, unaltered. As a result of the changes we made to our organisation, we have been growing ever since their implementation in 2003, with more young people now than ever, and twice as many members in the core teenage years than 10 years ago. This growth is not due to admitting girls, which we did a decade beforehand, and who now comprise around a quarter of Scouting's youth members. Later in this lecture, I will explain something of the changes Scouting made and how Freemasonry could learn from Scouting's experiences. Before then, I want to examine Robert Baden-Powell's relationship with Freemasonry. The question many ask is, was Baden-Powell a Freemason? Did the founder of the Scout movement get his inspiration from Freemasonry? Well, if you examine his CV, it becomes clear that not only would he have been an excellent candidate, but his interest would have made Freemasonry very attractive to him. However, I can confirm that Baden-Powell was not a Freemason. No record exists of him being initiated in or attending any meeting of any lodge under the English, Scottish or Irish constitutions. No one has come forward with any documentary evidence of his membership. His staff and his family all confirmed he was not a member, and I know members of the family very well. So, if Robert Baden-Powell was not a Freemason, what did he think of the craft? From original research and examination of primary sources, I've uncovered a trail of contacts that Baden-Powell had with Freemasonry, and I believe I can answer that question. The trail starts back in Mafeking during the siege. At its start on the 12th of October 1899, BP declared martial law and stopped all the town's organisations from meeting, including its Masonic Lodge, Austral Lodge, number 2534. The lodge remained closed for some months until February 1900, when BP gave permission for it to meet, even offering to design a commemorative jewel for the occasion. Incidentally, the picture depicts those attending the first meeting under siege conditions. The treasurer, Brother Edward Ross, reported that, and I quote, "During the time the lodge was working, a volley of Mauser bullets fired into the town." Baden-Powell was close friends with a number of Freemasons, one of the best known being Rudyard Kipling. They first met at around the time that Kipling was initiated into Hope and Perseverance Lodge number 782 in Lahore, and they remained close until Kipling's death in 1936. Kipling helped form the first younger section in Scouting, the Wolf Cubs, and his Jungle Book stories provided the allegorical basis for the section. A rather more senior Freemason was another of Baden-Powell's close friends. BP first met His Royal Highness the Duke of Connaught and Strathearn, again in India, in the 1880s, when, as adjutant to the 13th Hussars, BP was assigned to look after the Duke, which he did with some enthusiasm. Years later, in 1906, by which time the Duke was both Grand Master and Inspector General of the Forces, and BP was Inspector General of the Cavalry, they toured South Africa together. On 1st of February that year, they were both in Mafeking, and after the Duke had visited Austral Lodge, he and BP dined together. Although BP did not record the conversation in his diaries, it is clear they discussed Freemasonry and the Lodge. The Duke was BP's choice to be the first president of the then Boy Scouts Association, and such was their friendship that BP named his son after him, his first name being Arthur, although he was always known as Peter from the play Peter Pan. Very strong evidence of Baden-Powell's views of Freemasonry come from a letter sent to all lodges following meetings with the then Grand Secretary Philip Colville Smith. The year was 1921, not long after the Great War and very shortly after the first World Scout Jamboree. Scouting needed funds. In his letter, BP acknowledges a number of parallels between Scouting and Freemasonry and says, and I quote, "Our principles are closely allied with those of the Freemason, being those of brotherhood and service." Baden-Powell clearly thought well of Freemasonry. He just never joined. Some years later, while in Melbourne, Australia, Baden-Powell visited the Masonic Hall where the world's first Scout Lodge, Baden-Powell Lodge number 488, was based. He signed the lodge's Bible with an inscription that acknowledged the lodge's good work. He must have thought well of us. The lodge had been founded in 1929 by BP's later deputy and successor as Chief Scout, Lord Somers, Governor of Victoria and its Grand Master, who had gained BP's express permission to name the lodge after Baden-Powell. Many assumed that Baden-Powell was a Freemason. Among the many congratulatory letters he received after Mafeking was relieved were two from Masonic authorities. This one, from the District Grand Secretary of South Africa Western Division, can be paraphrased as follows. Dear Colonel Baden-Powell, we, the Freemasons of Cape Town, wish to congratulate you on the gallant job you did in beating those pesky Boers and restoring pride in the British Empire. We feel sure that you must be a Freemason and so wish to invite you to a meeting the next time you're in town, so that we may thank you personally. If, however, our information is incorrect and you are not a member of the craft, we still think you did a pretty good job. So if Baden-Powell thought so well of Freemasonry, why did he not become a Freemason? He often referred to his two lives. His first life was as a very successful army officer, and the second as the Chief Scout of the world. We know from correspondence that he had many opportunities to join the craft. He declined while Chief Scout because he feared that becoming a Freemason would cause a rift with Roman Catholic Scouts. For me, this shows his sensitivity to his own membership. What we don't know is why he didn't during his first life as an army officer. Now, personally, I believe it was for family reasons, but I will expand on this elsewhere. For now, I'll just say that only one of his many accomplished brothers ever became a Freemason, and then only around the time of their mother's death. However, the present Lord Baden-Powell, the grandson of BP, is a Freemason. Michael, the 4th Baron Baden-Powell, is a past Master of Baden-Powell Lodge number 488 in Victoria and a past Grand Officer of the Grand Lodge of Victoria. In 2014, I proposed Michael as a joining member of the Lodge of Unity, Peace and Concord number 316, the installed Masters Lodge of the Kindred Lodges Association. And so, for the first time, we can say that a descendant of Baden-Powell, and the holder of BP's titles at that, is an English Freemason. So, if Robert Baden-Powell was not a Freemason, is it possible that those Freemasons who worked with him at the start of Scouting inspired the parallels between Scouting and Freemasonry? In this section, I examine the part played by Masonic Scouters, and I also look at the Kindred Lodges Association, a group of lodges with a shared interest in youth work. Robert Baden-Powell did not found Scouting on his own. Many others inspired, encouraged and supported him. Is it possible that some of these influenced the building of the parallels with Freemasonry? I have researched the key people who worked with BP in the early embryonic years of Scouting, and I list the key ones here. It should be no surprise that many were Freemasons. However, when I compare these two lists, what strikes me is that those who were Freemasons tend to be what we would call ambassadors today. They didn't work at the nitty-gritty end. The people who camped with BP, toured with him, ran the office and were generally by his side, for the most part, fall into the second list. They were not Freemasons. My conclusion is that Freemasons were not responsible for creating these parallels. There was little or no Masonic DNA in Scouting as such. The parallels must be explained by deeper roots, going back to earlier times. We know, for instance, that BP's social conscience was developed at a very young age, and that he had a fascination with orders of knighthood and chivalric codes. Whatever the origins of the parallels, they exist, and many Freemasons have been Scouts. Indeed, as we say, once a Scout, always a Scout. While Scouting was not formed by Freemasons, it's clear that many Scouts have gone on to become Freemasons. One of the most well-known is Ralph Reeder, the Broadway producer and the founder of the gang shows. He was active in 2 Scouting lodges. In more recent times, Jock Barr was responsible for re-energising the Venture Scout section and became a Freemason in the Scout Headquarters Lodge. One who played a part in my becoming a Freemason was Kim Gale, the first initiate of my mother lodge and a very well-known Scout in his day. Inevitably, Masonic Scouters grouped together to form Scout lodges, and it wasn't long before they themselves grouped together to form a lodge association. The Kindred Lodges Association, or KLA, comprises almost 40 craft lodges in England, together with some overseas lodges and some Royal Arch chapters and mark lodges. Most of these are connected with Scouting, although a few are linked to the Boys Brigade and one to the cadet services. This brings us from the origins of Scouting right up to the present day. What is the relationship between Scouting and Freemasonry now? Well, I believe that I've established that the two organisations have the same purpose, the same values, and a good number of members in common. As membership organisations, they also face the very same challenges as they attempt to operate in the 21st century. These challenges are concerned with how we function as organisations, rather than our values or our deeper meaning. So, for example, what does the public understand us to be? How do we compete for members' time and energy when the members themselves have so many other options and ways to spend their time? How do we attract, introduce and retain new members? And then how do we communicate with them, support them and encourage good practice? How do we organise ourselves to provide this support? And what do we do when our membership units, be they scout groups or Masonic lodges, become unviable? How do we encourage them to evolve, change, move, or even to close? Scouting has already and continues to address these issues. Back in the 1990s, when it was in decline, it undertook a root and branch review of everything. There were no sacred cows. Everything was challenged, tested, examined. We consulted all of our members and external interested parties. And the results were a confirmation that the core meaning of Scouting, its fundamental values and principles, must continue unaltered. But everything else, the organisational parts, needed modernisation. So, we revitalised the youth programme, as a result of which Scouting has grown, become cool, and more young people are seeking to join. We changed the offer for adults too. We introduced better recruitment and leadership training processes. We changed the culture of local and central support so that it now works to meet the needs of those delivering Scouting in local scout groups. Today, the Scouts is a modern and relevant organisation with a vibrant public image. It is also a highly respected and innovative leader in the charity and volunteer sector. Freemasonry has supported Scouting in its change process. In 2008, the then Grand Charity made a major grant to the Scout Association to fund its programme to grow local provision. In 2015, the Royal Masonic Trust for Girls and Boys followed this up with a further grant targeted at starting Scouting in the country's 200 most deprived communities. This relationship is two-way. Scouting has always supported Freemasonry. One recent example, which came about since I started giving this lecture, is how Scouting inspired the Members' Pathway. The Members' Pathway is a toolkit for lodges, providing them with the practical guidance and tools to attract, introduce and retain new members. It was inspired by Scouting's Adults in Scouting model, which brings together in one complete package the means to recruit, induct, train and manage Scouting's adult volunteers. The Kindred Lodges Association has played its part in developing the relationship. It has engaged with Scouting and Masonic authorities at all levels to encourage collaboration and the sharing of ideas and experiences. It has also supported many Scouting projects, especially in connection with Scouting's heritage. I act as the Kindred Lodges Association's liaison with both the Scout Association and United Grand Lodge of England. Locally, there are many examples of collaboration. This scene is very familiar to Freemasons. It's a meeting in the Grand Temple. However, if you look closely, you will see that the people lined to the north and south of the pavement are not Grand Stewards. This is a meeting of the Metropolitan Grand Lodge of London, and the Brethren are receiving a presentation from London Scouts. The Scout Lodge in Worcestershire, Pathfinder Lodge, works in partnership with others to provide the administrative backup for the On-A-Way Scout and Guide Group, an innovative scheme that provides scouting and guiding to inpatients of the Birmingham Children's Hospital. The Lodge Secretary is also the Scout Group Secretary. The Lodge Treasurer is also the Scout Group Treasurer, and the Master chairs the Scout Group Executive and Trustees. Overseas, Relations between the two organisations are also developing. That very first Scouting Lodge, Baden-Powell Lodge in Melbourne, Victoria, has an annual event for Rover Scouts at which it presents an award for community service. Here in the image here you will see the Grand Master of Victoria, dressed not only in his Masonic regalia, but he's wearing it over his Scout uniform. Having brought us up to the present day, I'd now like to look towards the future. And what is my vision for the future relationship of the two organisations? And what are the opportunities for both of them? Since 2008, I've been meeting regularly with the chief executives of both organisations. The three of us get together round about twice a year. The current chief executive of the Scouts, Matt Hyde, appreciates the valuable support that Freemasonry has given to Scouting and wants to work with us in the future. The current Grand Secretary and Chief Executive of United Grand Lodge of England, Dr. David Staples, recognises that Scouting and Freemasonry are built on the same values and fully supports the sharing of our challenges, ideas and experiences. Building this relationship, therefore, has support from the highest level of both organisations. But what does it mean in practice? How can we actually help each other? Well, first I would encourage all Scouts and all Freemasons to work at building local relationships. I've written a document to help with this. It's called Creating Local Connections, and it can guide you through this process. Then there is the real opportunity to share experiences of running a membership organisation, be it at lodge, provincial or national levels, as well as ideas for the future. It's amazing how useful an external perspective can be. Then we have the incredible resource of the practical and professional skills that we've all developed and which could be of real benefit to Scouting, whether it be as auditors, electricians, mechanics, solicitors, investment advisors, photographers. The list is endless. And of course our buildings can be great community resources. Scouting would love to have access to Masonic halls for award nights or committee meetings or training courses, but perhaps not for section meetings. Most importantly, if we're open to learn from each other, we'll find many ways to help each other. That brings me to what salespeople would call the ask, and what the marketing people would call my vision. What if? What if every provincial Grand Master met with and got to know their local Scouting counterpart, the County Commissioner, so that they could share ideas and experiences and do so regularly? What if every Scout group, which started as a result of a grant from the Grand Charity or the RMTGB, was contacted by a local lodge to offer assistance, not money, but practical support? And what if every Freemason who ever made the Scout promise gave just one evening a year of their time and skills to local Scouting? So, to summarise my lecture, I think I've established that there are both traditional and contemporary parallels between Scouting and Freemasonry. And while some Freemasons had a role in the early days of Scouting, Scouting was certainly not born out of Freemasonry or from Masonic thinking. Many of today's Freemasons were once Scouts, and indeed Freemasonry could very well be attractive to today's Scouts if they know about us. But most importantly, both Scouting and Freemasonry can only benefit from a current understanding of what each organisation is today, not yesterday, and from building local, collaborative relationships. As I mentioned earlier, it is customary for Prestonian lecturers to produce a booklet form of their lecture to sell in aid of their chosen charities. For For those of you who want to know more, you can buy the book associated with my lecture. This goes into more detail than the oral version. The book is available from my website and costs £10 plus postage and packing. All proceeds are split equally between my two charities. You can also use the website www.prestonian2012.org.uk to contact me if you want more information. My chosen charities, therefore, supported by the lectureship, are firstly the Scout Association's Heritage Fund, which exists to educate people about Scouting and its history, and which is currently working to establish and build the United Kingdom's National Museum of Scouting. My second charity is the Masonic Charitable Foundation, which helps people build better lives and supports Freemasons and their families in need, as well as other charitable causes in our communities. If you want to do more to support Scouting, and especially Gilwell Park, you may be interested in becoming a Gilwell Fellow. Please contact me direct for more information. Finally, may I thank you for your interest in this subject, for viewing this lecture, but most importantly, I want to thank you for what you're going to do in the future to help build that relationship between Scouting and Freemasonry. Thank you.